All right. Hello, class. My name is Ethan Kaplan, and today I'm going to be presenting about cultivation theory. Now, to start off, I want you to imagine that you're watching the news on TV, and it seems that every other story, there's some sort of tragic event that happened. Maybe there's something about the pandemic, maybe there's some kind of shooting, maybe there's some other tragic world event happening somewhere. Either way, it feels that every time you turn on the TV, something is happening. Now, why does this always seem to be the case? What kind of effect does this have on the people who are watching the news? Well, to answer one of those questions, as to the reasons of why the news seems to always have something happening, is that the news is a business. The news is an industry. People need to make money off of the news. Now, as a result, the news will often opt for stories that they deem interesting, that they think will get viewership, that they think will maintain an audience every night. They won't opt for the mundane. If the most interesting thing on the news every night was that maybe it snowed in June, nobody would pay attention all that much. People wouldn't tune in every day. As sad as it might sound, milking tragedies or massive world events is probably the way to go when it comes to making money off of the news. When people have an emotional reaction to what is happening, they'll tend to tune in more and want to be informed and be updated on what might be happening if they feel invested in what is currently going on in the world. For example, I want you to think back to early 2020, when there was panic over World War III potentially starting because of an Iranian general who was killed. Now, at the time, people who were tapped into the news were worried about the ramifications of such an event. Obviously, like it's a big deal. People are worried that it might spark retaliation, that it might cause conflict. But as we know now, there wasn't any sort of massive conflict that happened. There was no war. There was no, there was no World War III. And, where we are right now, it sort of feels like a lifetime ago. But at the time, it seemed like a massive deal, and it felt like it was the topic of conversation for a long time. Now, there are various aspects of cultivation theory that can answer how people perceive the news and how it affects their perception of the world. Now, for some context, what cultivation theory is that it's the idea that what we know is based off of media, that media shapes what we know. Now, some of the assumptions of cultivation theory are that television is fundamentally different from other kinds of media, that television shapes our society's perception of the world around them, and finally, that the influence of television is in fact limited. Now, each of these assumptions ring true and can be applied to the news on television. It is thanks to the news on TV that the news is accessible, that the news can happen live, that it can show live feeds, that it can have interviews with eyewitnesses, that it can provide video of what is currently happening and show people firsthand what stories are happening. The news on TV also shapes the perception of the world because the news is supposed to be an account of what is happening in the world. It tells us what's going on, it keeps us informed, and it even shows us what's going on through the visuals. And the news, the influence of the news is in fact limited by how receptive people are to the news, by how many people are watching the news, by what stories they're paying attention to, and the fact that the news has to compete with other companies and even other forms of media like social media. like Twitter and Instagram and stuff. Now, another aspect of cultivation theory that can provide insight into TV's impact on people's perceptions of the world is the mean world index, which connects how mean people feel the world is with how much TV somebody watches. And what it finds is that people who watch more TV find that the world is a meaner place than people who watch less TV. And this is because television has a direct effect on its viewers and their perception of life and the world around them. People who watch the news and see all the negativity will think the world's a meaner place compared to somebody who just casually tunes in every now and then. Now, another explanation for how media directly affects people's mindsets is the 3 B's of television, which are that television blurs the traditional views of the world, it blends people's realities into the mainstream, and it bends the mainstream into the interest of corporations, sponsors, and the television industry itself. Now, this is important as it gives important insight as to why people react the way they do towards the news, or how people seem to view the state of the world. The 3 B's explain what is happening, but the specific results can vary depending on the situation. For example, bending the mainstream might push people to buy certain products or brands. Blending can mean that people will look for stuff that they relate to on TV. And blurring can make people have like a shared knowledge of some kind of culture through television, like common knowledge of like what Star Wars is and stuff like that. But in terms of the news, it blurs information so that it's easily digestible, that people can quickly understand what's happening and that they have no problem understanding what's going on. It can blend people's understanding of current events together, and it can bend people's perception of the world to possibly be more pessimistic and find the world a meaner place. Overall, cultivation theory provides insight into how media can affect our mindsets and our perceptions of the world in various ways. And it's important to keep in mind. So thank you for your time.